All right, so let's take a little brief aside here and talk about the Q questions, because I think the Q questions are a lot easier to answer now that we've begun translating, because now you're seeing we are faced with times where an English expression might be a little odd, and we have to think about what it actually means so we can translate it into the much clearer language of SL. So I think these questions start fairly straightforward, so let's look at them, right? So let's look at the easy ones, and let's pause and I'll explain the more tricky ones. Question one of the Q exercises, question one of the Q questions on page 17. What SL connective symbol should you use to translate and? That one is very straightforward. An and directly is the word we use to represent the ampersand symbol, the conjunction. Number one, pretty clear. Number two, also clear. What SL connective symbol should you use to translate or? Clear, this is our little wedge symbol, our disjunction symbol. Easy. Now it gets a little trickier. What SL connective symbol should you use to translate because? From the video, I think you can solve this, but if you didn't have the video, you would have to think about what function because has. So you'd have to think about, when I have a because sentence, can it be replaced with an and or an or, as we now know, does this have to be an arrow? And so the easy thing to do is just take simple sentences in your head and think, are they captured by or? So let's see. Jeff looks like a monkey because he has a huge beard. So now think. Jeff looks like a monkey and he has a huge beard? No. Jeff looks like a monkey or he has a huge beard? No, right? We can see that these things are causally related to each other. This is an arrow. Sentence 4. Oh, and lastly, in case you are tempted to do something really strange, listen to how terrible negation or biconditional sounds, right? Jeff looks like a monkey, not he has a huge beard. No. Jeff looks like a monkey if and only if he has a huge beard. Now that does make sense, right? So we have to think, is this a biconditional or a conditional? And how do we know it's not a biconditional? Because Jeff got very angry at us and said we only need the biconditional for if and only if, IFF period, and necessary and sufficient conditions are. So we know arrow makes sense, right? And it's the only one we can use. 4, try this. Oh, forget my computer in the background. 4, try this. What SL connective symbol should you use to translate but? Now think, let's use the same technique. If we're looking at this, we can fill in basic sentences that include the word but that make sense and see which connective actually works, which one captures the meaning. Because again, we only need these 5 connectives. English isn't as complicated as we think it is. Here we go. So what could we say? Jeff's videos are hideous, but they're helpful. So let's try that. Let's try each of our connectives. Jeff's videos are hideous and they're helpful. That makes sense. Jeff's videos are hideous or they're helpful? No, different meaning. If Jeff's videos are hideous, then they're helpful. No, they're not helpful because they're hideous. Jeff's videos are hideous if and only if they're helpful? No, that's not what we're saying. Lastly, obviously, Jeff's videos are hideous, not, right, they're helpful. No, right? So what do we have? And. The English expression but really means the same thing as and. It just has a little negative connotation to it, but it really just means and. Sentence 5. What SL connective symbol should you use to translate unless? Now notice how this works. So we can try this. We can say, Jeff's videos are hideous unless he hires a supermodel to do them. Jeff's videos are hideous and he uses a supermodel? No. Jeff's videos are hideous or, that does make sense. But think of what unless means, right? Unless has a causal connection. It's not just either or, it's saying the one thing affects the other in an order, in a cause. So this is, again, the arrow. Unless connotes connective, causal or temporal order, so it is an arrow. But that is the tricky one. Now, if you will notice, on page 16, when there are really tricky English idioms like unless and only if, I provided a translation technique for them. Those idioms are weird, so I supplied some little hints about what you do when you deal with a very strange expression like unless. Now notice what's incredible there. We know how to use unless, but we don't really understand its meaning, right? We have very good instincts when it comes to spoken language, but written language is a real tricky apparatus. It is a complete convention that we've invented. That's why kids learn to speak easily, but reading, writing, that stuff's tricky. All right, so now we're going to take another step closer to our goal. Remember, our goal is to use this language of SL to be able to apply it to English language arguments in order to test for validity very precisely and perfectly. All right, so now we are ready to translate arguments. So look at the bottom of page 17. Let's translate the argument, right? The first argument under the Q exercises, part C. So the last argument on page 17 in the syllabus. All right, so let's look at it. Now, I will be following the translation technique steps that are listed on page 16. So if you need reminders, right, just refer there that these are the steps we're going through. When we're dealing with arguments, and this will apply more to when we're creating our own dictionaries, but it's a good practice, the most important part of an argument is the conclusion, so we will always start there. So the conclusion to the first argument of the part C of Q says, logic is boring if and only if most of the students are not getting A's. So we start with the conclusion, step 1. Step 2, underline any possible connectives. So you're looking for any two-place connectives like and, or, if, then. You're looking for negations and possibly hidden negations, right, of meaning. So we read, logic is boring. I would underline boring. That sounds negative. If and only if, remember, that's a whole phrase, right? So each of those little words could be a connective, but that's a special phrase. That's our rare double arrow. And most of the students are not. Not needs to be underlined. So straightforward. Now we read step 3, looking for the main connective. Here, the main connective is pretty obvious, right? The if and only if is obviously our main connective in English. That's the hinge of the sentence. And so we are already ready to translate this into SL. So we can start translating. We fill in the main connective into SL. If and only if is, yes, we get another double arrow. The double arrow is written in. We leave plenty of room around it. And when we write it in, remember, we're going to put it in bold so we remember that's our main connective, so that when we start worrying about filling in the parentheses, we know that the key is to make sure the main connective is clear based on our punctuation. So we write in the double arrow. Does a double arrow affect the order of the sentence? No. Just leave it alone, just like and or. It is only the single arrow that can affect the order and force us to rearrange our sentence. So we fill in the double arrow and then translate around it. The left side of the double arrow in the English sentence says, logic is boring. We look at our dictionary, right? So now we have a new dictionary. E says logic is exciting, so what do we need? So boring is negative. We need negative E. Logic is not exciting. Now we can go to the left side of our, Now we can go to the right side of our double arrow. The right side said most of the students are not getting A's. So we underline, so we're paying attention to the negation. We look at our dictionary and it says most of the students are getting A's is the letter A, so we just need not A, clear. Is the main connective clear, or do we need parentheses? Main connective is obvious, we're fine. So now we go up to premise 1. Premise 1, step 2, right? We underline any possible connectives. Jeff's examples are too difficult. Now, too difficult sounds negative, so let's underline it. And, obviously underline and. His leprosy jokes are tired, right? Underline tired, that doesn't sound good. So premise 1, we underlined all the possible connectives, difficult and tired. Now we look for the main connective. Obviously, there's only one two-place connective here, so that's got to be the main connective. And is our main connective. Good. So now we can fill in and start translating SL. How do we translate and? Easiest one, that's the ampersand, the conjunction and. Does an and affect order? No, it does not, so we can just translate around it. Left side of and. Jeff's examples are too difficult. Good. Let's see. Jeff's examples are simple is S, so they're not simple, right? They're too difficult, so not S. Right side of and says his leprosy jokes are tired, right? L says his leprosy jokes are fresh, so they aren't fresh, they're tired, so we need not L, right? The leprosy jokes are not fresh. So there's our translation. We just need to make sure we don't need parentheses. So we ask, is the main connective clear or do we need parentheses? Main connective is clear, fairly simple sentence. Main connective and obvious, we don't need parentheses. Premise 2. Either, underline either. Jeff's examples are too difficult, underline too difficult. Or, underline or, most of the students are getting A's. Clear. Now we read looking for the main connective. What is it? Clearly it's the either or, so the or part of the sentence is the hinge, so label or as the main connective. And we're already ready to translate. How do we translate or? Obviously disjunction, our little wedge, so we fill that in and make it stand out as the main connective. Does or affect the order? Nope. Leave the sentence order alone. Left side. Now notice, like an if with a then, either just signals an or is coming. We don't translate the either separately. So the left side says, Jeff's examples are too difficult. Oh, this is a lot like premise 1. What do we need? They are not simple, so not S. Right side. Most of the students are getting A's, simply A. Clear. We look at our sentence. We don't need parentheses. The main connective's obvious. Sentence 3. If, we underline if, Jeff's examples are not, underline not, too difficult, underline too difficult, comma, I always underline commas just to pay attention to them, then, underline then, most of the students have A's. All right, so let's do the work. Again, gets more complicated, but we go step by step so it doesn't bother us. First, look for our main connective. Main connective is obviously the if-then, right? So we can then start our translation. Label the then in the English sentence, just in case this gets complex. You need to remember where your main connective is, and then we can translate. How do we translate then? The arrow. Obviously, this is a causal or temporal order, so we need our arrow. Now, we label it to make sure we can see that that's the main connective when we're writing SL, and we do have to worry. The arrow, remember, is the only connective in which the order might have to be rearranged because we need our sentences to go left to right, just like the order shows. We need SL sentences to always be as clear as possible, not like your cruddy English that has all sorts of weird expressions. So, we need to check this sentence to see if the order is left to right or if we have to rearrange it. It says, if Jeff's examples are not too difficult, then most of the students have A's. This sentence is fine as it is. It's already left to right, so we can just translate around the arrow as it exists. Left side of the arrow. Jeff's examples are not too difficult. Notice, we're getting used to this. S is Jeff's examples are simple. So to say they're too difficult would be to be not simple. So we need not S. But this says they are not too difficult, so we need, not S. Good. That is actually what the expression is. Notice, SL captures both value and meaning. So yes, the value would mean that the examples are simple, but the meaning includes a double negative. So yes, it means the same thing as simple, but we translate what's there. The author used a double negative, so we use a double negative. SL isn't fascist, it allows double negatives. Now we go to the right side. Most of the students have A's, very straightforward, just A. We look at our example, we look at SL sentence. Is the main connective clear or do we need parentheses? Nope, main connective's clear, all the scopes are fine, clear sentence. Premise 3 is done. Premise 4. Either, underline either. Jeff's examples are not, underline not, too difficult. underline difficult, or, underline or, logic is boring, underline boring. All right, now we're getting a lot more complexity. We now look for our main connective. Where is it? Obviously, the either or is the hinge of the sentence, so label the or in the English to keep track of the main connective. How do we translate or? Easy one. Or, disjunction, our little wedge symbol. An or does not affect order, so we simply translate around it. We already translated either. Remember, that just signals the or, so we translate, Jeff's examples are not too difficult. Now you're ready for it. S means the examples are simple, not S means they're difficult, not S means they're not too difficult. You can do this. So we're all set on the left side, right side, logic is boring. What does that mean? It's not exciting, so not E. Great. How'd you do? All right, so take a deep breath. We are ready to turn to page 18. So Q exercises, part C. We're continuing with the argument on the top of page 18. Now, of course, the nice thing about these videos, even nicer than being in class, although I really wish we were in class, it's so much more fun. But the nice thing is you can pause me whenever you want. So if you want to try to stay ahead of me as I'm translating, if you tried this on your own and you're not sure how you're doing, but as we go over this, you're feeling more confident, please pause at any time and try to predict what the answers will be. That is great practice because you don't want it to depend on me. We want, so when the big quiz comes, you are used to doing these by yourself and you can think of all the issues in your own head. All right, so let's look at the argument at the top of page 18. Right, so this is Q exercises, top of page 18. We, as usual, based on the directions again that you can find on page 16, we start with the conclusion. Logic is exciting and most students have A's. What we do, second step after we start with the conclusion, is underline any possible connectives. What do we have? Logic is exciting, seems positive. Most students have A's, seems positive. All I see is the and. So we underline and. Third step, obviously and is the main connective, so label it in English so it stands out. And we can start translating. This should be pretty easy. Write down and, obviously the ampersand sign, conjunction and. An and does not affect order, so we just translate around it, right? Logic is exciting, right? Translation, simply E. Right side, most students have A's. That means most of the students are getting A's. Translation, simply A. Good. Now, whenever we finish a sentence, we look, does it need parentheses or is the main connective clear? Main connective is obvious, really simple sentence, and obviously the main connective. So go up to premise 1. Remember, we start with the conclusion, it's always the most important, and then we work our way down the premises after that. Premise 1. We read, underlining any possible connectives. If, underline if. Remember, that's going to signal a then that's going to come up. If Jeff's leprosy jokes were fresh, that seems positive, then, underline comma then, logic would be exciting. Translation. So let's work. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Main connective. Pretty clearly, I only see one connective underlined at all, so the comma then, that's where the main connective goes. Then is our main connective. How do we translate? Easy. Then implies order. This happens, then this happens. So it's our arrow, our conditional arrow. We do have to worry about arrows though. Remember, they are the only connective that can affect order. So we have to check our sentence. Let's check our sentence to see if it implies left or right order or if the sentence needs to be rearranged. If Jeff's leprosy jokes were fresh, then logic would be exciting. This has clear order. If happens, then happens. It's clear in order already. We leave it alone. If has already been translated in our arrow, so we translate Jeff's leprosy jokes were fresh. Simply L straight in the dictionary. Right side, logic would be exciting. E, easy, dictionary. Our translation, do we need parentheses? No, simple sentence. Good. Now, of course, if I'm ever going too fast, pause, slow it down, right? Please, I'm going to go fast, assuming you'll pause whenever you need. Premise 2. Jeff is a comic genius if and only if, underline if and only if, his leprosy jokes are fresh. I only see the connective if and only if, so that's obviously our main connective. Label it. We can start translating. If and only if, double arrow, straightforward. We translate around the double arrow. A double arrow does not affect order like and or. It just stays in place. Translate around it. Left side. Jeff is a comic genius. Hey, finally we got a new one. Translation, right from the dictionary, C. Right side. His leprosy jokes are fresh, straight from the dictionary, L. Premise 3. If, underline if. Jeff were hyperactive as well as. Notice, that's a connective. That's connecting the idea of hyperactive with comic genius, so we underline as well as. Comma, underline, then underline, logic would not, underline not, be so boring, underline boring, that sounds negative, and, underline and, most of us would be getting A's. Seems clear, right? We think we've got all our connectives, looks good. We now look for the main connective. The whole sentence is a big if-then sentence. Good. So the main connective is the comma then. Draw an arrow or something over it, label it so you can see it's the main connective. In case, and especially in a case like this where there's a lot of connectives, you want to be able to look back at your English to be sure you have the main connective right. And so when you're translating, that's it. Because let's say there are multiple arrows in the sentence, we want to be sure we have the right one as our main connective. So we start translating. If then, obviously an arrow, so we have to worry about order. If Jeff were hyperactive as well as a comic genius, then logic would not be so boring and most of us would be getting A's. Clearly the order is fine. We can leave the sentence order alone. This one already goes left to right. Left side. Now remember, we've already translated if, so now we are translating. So if you ever get kind of complex, if you ever feel that things are getting too complex, don't hesitate to treat each of these sentences as its separate little sentence so you're not overwhelmed by the whole thing. So let's just pretend we're translating a fairly simple sentence that simply says, Jeff were hyperactive as well as a comic genius. What do? We need to translate as well as. Let's start with a connective like we usually do. What does as well as mean? We're now at the level where when we get different sorts of expressions, different idioms, we can think of what they actually mean. That clearly means as well as, meaning both, meaning and. So we will translate as an and then translate around it, and does not affect order. Jeff were hyperactive, simply H, right in our dictionary. As well as a comic genius. We've got and for as well as. What does it say? Jeff is a comic genius. Obviously C from the dictionary. Can we tell that already we're going to need parentheses around this expression? Yes, right? So we'll need to put parentheses around that sentence we just translated to isolate it from our main connective arrow. So let's do it now. Now we can go to the right side. Now we'll only worry about this sentence, work small parts at a time. Logic would not be so boring and most of us would be getting A's. Let's start with the two-place connective. And is obvious, fill in the and. And does not affect order, so we'll translate around it. Logic would not be so boring. Good. What do we have? We have logic is exciting. We need it's not boring. If it's exciting, then to make it boring would be to make it not exciting or not E, but we're saying it's not boring, so we need two negations, not E. Right side of the and. Most of us would be getting A's, simply A. Clearly, we're going to need additional parentheses because we have a main connective and then we have this and on the right. We know that the conditional arrow is the main connective, so we need to separate or isolate the and sentence from the main connective, so we put parentheses around our sentence. Notice as we're drawing it, those double negations connect to the E, so they need to stay inside the parentheses. Is the main connective now clear? Yes. All our scopes are clear. Great sentence. So now we're ready for part D of the Q exercises. So of course I am on page 18 of the syllabus. I am so proud of you for getting through this. I know this could be arduous. Don't forget, please pause whenever you want to work on things. It would be great if you could stay ahead of me, right? Stay one step ahead of me if you can. If you can't, work together with me, but try to develop this skill so you can do it without me, right? So please, whenever you can, get ahead of me so that you can gain more confidence when you're on your own doing this. Good. So we have a different sort of skill set here. Now we need to create our own dictionary. So this is simulating the real way you would do this. You would have an argument. You would have to create your dictionary as you're translating into SL. Now, so that you're not overly afraid of this part of the skill, please know that on the big quiz, I will be providing dictionaries. But, right, if you are really going to do well at this, on the final exam, for example, I might have you create your own simple dictionary, right? It depends. I will either give the final exam with some complicated sentences to translate, or I'll keep the sentences really basic, but have you also create your own dictionary, right? So we do need this skill, but again, our big quiz coming up will not include this skill. I will provide the dictionary on our next big quiz. But it's not very hard, so watch how easy this is. So let me first say something about what we need to do to create dictionaries. Let me give you a few tips about that. First big issue. It is a nice idea to use the capital letters for your sentence letters that are easy to remember based on your sentences. I mean, if you look back at the ones we just did, right, I used things like E for exciting, right, C for comic genius, students are getting A's, I used A. That's helpful. The most important tips, though, are keep your dictionary sentences positive. When you assign a basic sentence letter to a simple English sentence, make sure there are no negations or even negative expressions in your sentences. Keep the negations out because that will make translation very difficult. We can always add negations in when we translate, but keep anything negative out of your dictionary. And then, other important tip, make sure there are no connectives in your dictionary. That would ruin everything. So you cannot have anything like an or, an and, a then, anything like because, so, also. No commas in your dictionary. These need to be single sentences, simple claims. The last tip is don't try to create your dictionary before you begin translating. Create a new dictionary sentence only as you need it. This will make it a lot easier because you might not see the pitfalls that are coming up until you're in the midst of the argument. Good? So, for example, if you create your dictionary at the beginning, you might miss a synonym. Let's say they're using two words that start with a different letter, but they clearly mean the same thing. If you're creating your dictionary as you go, you will quickly realize it's a synonym. So if we say Jeff's videos are ugly and then Jeff's videos are hideous, well, clearly those are the same things. We would have to translate them with the same basic sentence, right? Let's say we use you for Jeff's videos are ugly, and then we know the sentence Jeff's videos are hideous would also be translated with you. All right, so let's try the first one nice and short. We start with the conclusion, we go through our usual steps, we only create a dictionary sentence when we see the need for one. So let's start. We're looking at the short argument at the beginning of part D on page 18. Conclusion says he must have used deodorant. What do? We underline any possible connectives. I don't see any. I don't see any negations. I don't see two-place connectives. So the sentence is its own sentence. But this tells us we need our first basic sentence. We want to keep it positive and keep it simple, so let's just simply use D, that's easy to remember, for Jeff uses deodorant. Good? All right, so we fill that in up at the top. That's our first dictionary letter D for Jeff used deodorant. Now we can translate. How do we translate our conclusion? Simply D. And that D will be the main connective, right? It is its own sentence. We're all set. There it is. Obviously no parentheses needed. D by itself, conclusion done. Now we have D in our dictionary. We go up to premise 1. If, now we're underlining, remember? If, underline if. Jeff takes the time to shave, comma, underline commas. He doesn't, underline doesn't, use deodorant. Now, we go and find the main connective. Where is it? The comma. What does the comma represent? If you look at it in context, it's a then. Comma has replaced then because English is very uncareful and a much worse language than SL. SL is beautiful and the best ever. So that represents then. Good? So we translate that starting with the main connective. And how do we translate it? Obviously our arrow. But we have to worry about an arrow. An arrow can rearrange the order of a sentence. We need the meaning to go left to right. So we look at the English and the order is fine. If happens, then happens. This is already in order, so we can translate right around where that arrow exists. Left side of the arrow, if. We've already translated if, that's what the arrow implies. Jeff takes the time to shave. All right, so now we need another dictionary sentence. Let's use S. Jeff shaves, or Jeff shaved. Either way is fine. We translate the left side of our arrow, fill in our dictionary, simply S. Right side, he doesn't, underline doesn't, right, use deodorant. How do we translate? Not D. Really clear. Do we need parentheses? No. Sentence is clear and obvious. We're done. Premise 2. Today, Jeff is not clean shaven. Underline not. I don't see any other connectives, so we're all set. We can translate this really simply. What is it? Simply not S. Premise 2 is done. We have our little argument. So notice, remember, this is the payoff. We can now go on to learn how to test that argument for validity without having to use our other terrible methods that we were looking at. So now go to the second argument under the D exercises on page 18. I made each one have a different number of premises to make it easy to refer to. So this is the argument that has 4 premises right about in the middle of page 18. We follow our normal progress. We make dictionary sentences as we need them. Good? We start with our conclusion. Jeff either. I underline either, just like I underline an if. It's telling me that an or is coming. Good. Jeff either, underline either, shaved or used deodorant, underline or, pretty obviously. Main connective, or, pretty clear. Translation, or, wedge, right, our little disjunction symbol. An or does not affect order, so we translate around it. Left side, Jeff shaved. S. Right side, Jeff used deodorant. D. No parentheses needed. Easy, simple sentence. Now we get to some real difficulty. My strategy in homework exercises is, as I mentioned earlier, I get tricky on purpose and in little ways in the exercises to warn you about things to look for. I won't be this tricky on a big quiz, but this one is to give you a sense of how negations and parentheses work. Let me preview. The next argument we will deal with will have you dealing with synonyms, like I was mentioning with the dictionary. It'll get you to worry about synonyms and pay attention to them so that on the quiz it's really easy. I won't use any tricky synonyms there. The last argument we'll deal with in D, that one is just tricky altogether. That has real complexity. There's nothing unfair, but it's really complicated. All right, so let's go back to the argument at the middle of page 18. We translated the conclusion. Premise 1 is a sticky one. Premise 1, we first underline. Jeff either, underline either, has forgotten. Clearly, that implies negation, underline forgotten, to brush his teeth, or, underline or, he forgot, underline forgot, to use deodorant, or, underline or, shave. So notice, there's all these forgots in here. So this is tricky with parentheses and negations. But don't stress, step by step. We read the sentence again looking for the main connective. What do you see? Or, and obviously the first or. The second or seems grouped together really closely, so the first or in the sentence between teeth and he, that's the main connective, so we can start translating. Or is obviously our little wedge disjunction or symbol. Left side. The left side says Jeff has, we already translated either. Jeff has forgotten to brush his teeth. Oops, we need a new dictionary sentence. Let's look at it. Now, we don't want to include forgot in our dictionary because that's negative, so we need a nice positive sentence. Jeff brushed his teeth, right? What do we think? T. Seems clear. Now, we don't want to use be because teeth, brushing teeth and brushing hair could confuse us, so let's use teeth. So T, Jeff brushes his teeth. How do we translate the left side? Jeff has forgotten to brush his teeth, simply not T. Jeff didn't brush his teeth, that's what it means to say he forgot it. Right side. He forgot to use deodorant or shave. This is the tricky part. We already can see the or, so let's fill that in. Let's fill in the two-place connective, make it clear, translate around it. Or does not affect order, so we can just work around it. But it says this, and this is where we have to think about what the meaning is. English has some weird idioms that our Gus can capture, and we've got to make sure we're capturing it into SL. He forgot to use deodorant or shave. Now, here's where it gets weird. Our families use expressions like this differently, and so we are accustomed to hearing it the way our families do. Half of us will understand this one way, and it will seem obvious. Half of us will understand it another way, and that will seem obvious to them. So, does this sentence mean I forgot both to use deodorant and forgot to shave, or does it mean I forgot one or the other? It's pretty vague. Notice how this changes based on parentheses. Let me show you. If I think it means I forgot one or the other, I would write the sentence this way. Look at what this means. This says he forgot to use deodorant or he forgot to shave. See how the negations work. They are on either side of the or. But if I think this means I forgot both, I would put the negation outside. Look at this sentence. What does it say? He did not use deodorant or shave. It implies I didn't do either of them. Good? So, on a quiz, again, I would be clear in meaning, but I just wanted you to see what effect the placement of the parentheses has. All right, so depending on your reading, that ending of that sentence could be different. Now, clearly, are there now obviously parentheses on the right side of that main connective? Yes, and that makes the main connective clear. So notice, if you had the negative parentheses D or S, you have parentheses. But if you translate it as not D or not S, then you need parentheses around that sentence. Which one is correct? If that was a quiz, I would have to count either of those correct because the sentence is vague. Premise 2. Jeff didn't brush his hair. Underline connectives, we underline didn't, that's all I see. But now we need a new dictionary sentence. What do we need? We don't want it to be negative, we want it positive, so Jeff brushes his hair, let's call it H. Add it to your dictionary. So we can translate sentence 2, we have the main connective, it's just the negation, that's all that's there. So what do we have? Simply not H. Premise 3. If, underline if, he didn't, underline didn't, brush his hair, then, underline comma, then, he's probably not, underline not, clean shaven either. Now, you could underline either, it sounds like a connective, but it's just style. But underline it just to make sure you can make a decision when you're ready. We look for the main connective. What is it? Clearly a big if-then sentence, so we label the then in the sentence to make it stand out. Then we can translate our main connective. How do we translate then? Arrow. But that means we have to worry about order. Will we have to rearrange this sentence? Nope, it's fine. If he didn't, then he probably, we've got the order fine. Left side, we've already translated if. He didn't brush his hair, simply not H. Right side, he is probably not clean shaven either. What do we have? He's not clean shaven, not S. What does either do? Nothing. It's just stylistic. It sends a little message. Look how lazy this guy is. He didn't do either thing, but the meaning is perfectly clear. Do we need parentheses? No. Main connective's obvious. Premise 4. We read underlining possible connectives. If, underline if, he's not, underline not, clean shaven, comma then, underline comma then, he didn't, underline didn't, brush his teeth, or, underline or, hair. A lot going on, step by step makes it easy. What is the main connective? Obviously the comma then, right? We can translate right away, arrow, main connective, but arrow can affect order. Do we have to rearrange this one? Nope, the order is fine. It's a simple if-then sentence. Left side, he's not clean shaven. Translation, simply not S. Right side, he didn't brush his teeth or hair. Now notice what we've got again. But this one is more clear. He didn't do either of these things. So let's fill in our or and then try to make sure we capture the meaning. What does it imply? He didn't do either of these things. So we need the negation on the outside of the parentheses. Inside is T or H. He did not T or H. He didn't brush his teeth or hair. Those parentheses are clear. The negation goes to the outside. So now that we look at our final sentence, is the main connective clear? It is. It's the arrow. So we don't need any more parentheses. Good. All right. The third argument under the D parts of the Q exercises. Sorry, that's a lot to say. This is the second to last argument, the one that has 3 premises near the bottom of page 18 of the syllabus. Here, as I said, we're looking out for synonyms. I'm trying to scare you into paying attention to them so that if I give a much more reasonable synonym on a big quiz, you will spot it easily after me terrifying you in this one. We start, as usual, in the conclusion. We read the conclusion, looking for any possible connective. Jeff must have BO. BO sounds bad, so I'm going to underline it. If, underline if, he has brushed his teeth. What is the main connective? If, obviously. How do we translate that? So we label it in English, translate it into SL, conditional arrow. Conditional arrow is the only time we have to worry about order, and this is a strange sentence. It says Jeff must have BO if he has brushed his teeth. So notice, what happened first? He brushed his teeth first, so we need to rearrange this sentence, flip its order. So the left side is he has brushed his teeth. Translation, simply T. Right side, Jeff must have BO. Now notice what's going on there. Should we create a new dictionary sentence, or is Jeff being really weird? Yes, Jeff is being weird. If I have BO, what does that mean? I didn't use deodorant. So we will translate this as not D. Clear. Simple sentence, don't need parentheses. Premise 1, read. If, underline if, Jeff doesn't, underline doesn't, have minty fresh breath. Comma then, underline comma then, he is clean shaven and smells flowery. Clean shaven, positive, flowery, positive. I don't see any other negations. We look for the main connective, obviously the conditional if then. We mark that out, start our translation with our arrow. An arrow can affect order. How is the order of this one? It's fine. It's if then order, really clear, leave it left to right. Left side. Jeff doesn't have minty fresh breath. What does minty fresh breath mean? Do we need a new dictionary sentence? No. It simply means I brushed my teeth, so we already have T, but this says he doesn't have minty fresh breath, so what? He didn't brush his teeth, not T. Right side of our arrow. He is clean shaven and smells flowery. Let's fill in the and, that's obvious. He is clean shaven, S is obvious. Smells flowery though. What do we do on the right side? Yep, Jeff is weird, right? He never smells flowery, so it must just be his deodorant. Pause. There are only, and don't you dare correct me, there are only 3 or 4 smells in the world. There are flowers, which usually smell gross. There is pie, which is what all good smells smell like. And then there is what? Poo and vomit. Good? So mostly bad smells unless you have pie. Good? How does deodorant smell? Doesn't smell like pie. It smells like flowers. So there you go. If I smell flowery, that's what I would say deodorant is. Sorry. So when we write this sentence, right? Smells flowery, simply D. Do we need parentheses when we look at our sentence? Yes. We need to isolate the and part of the sentence from the arrow main connective, so we draw parentheses around S and D. Now main connective is clear. Sentence 2, more synonyms. Either, underline either. Jeff used some French shower in a can, Or, underline or, else he didn't, underline didn't, brush his hair, and, underline and, is rudely unshaven. Don't notice that. There's a little hidden negation there. Unshaven. But, underline but, if he is another underline it, unshaven, then, underline, he must have BO underlined. There's a lot here. Take it one step at a time. It's going to be a little tricky finding this main connective, so let's read it in a fairly natural pace. Either Jeff used some French shower in a can, or else he didn't brush his hair and is rudely unshaven. But if he is unshaven, then he must have BO. Notice the natural pause due to the punctuation is where? The but in the sentence. How do we translate but? So label it as your main connective, but how do we translate that? If you paid attention to the questions we dealt with earlier, then you'll know that but in English really just means and. Think about it. If I use a basic sentence that would contain a natural expression but, it means the same thing as and. I want to go to the store, but we are in the coronavirus shutdown. I want to go to the store and we are in the coronavirus shutdown. It really means the same thing. It just has a negative connotation. So we label but as our main connective, translate it as and into SL. Leave tons of room around it. And does not affect order, so let's go to the left side and treat that as its own translation. The left side says, either Jeff used some French shower in a can, or else he didn't brush his hair and is rudely unshaven. What is the largest connective there? Or. So you might want to highlight that in some way, either in the English, and maybe even when you're translating into SL, you have a pencil and paper, I have this terrible screen, so I would make a little mark by or, so I know that's a large connective, not the main connective, but a major one. Or does not affect order, so we'll translate the left side of it. Either, we already have that in the or, Jeff used some French shower in a can. I am so sorry, right? French people are known for not showering enough. Americans are known for showering too much. What is French shower in a can? Using deodorant. I am so sorry. Got it? This reminds me of a cute thing that I heard that sports people say. Sports people will say, oh, I have to leave the gym early today. I will just take a shower pill. What is a shower pill? Not taking a shower at all, right? It's just a joke way of saying no shower for me. Anyway, French shower in a can means he used deodorant. Good? So translation, D. Now we move on. Or, we have that written, he didn't brush his hair and is rudely unshaven. Well, let's fill in the and so we can translate around it. So we're making room. He didn't brush his hair goes on the left side. That's obvious, not H. He's rudely unshaven. What does that mean? Didn't shave, not S. Now we're at our main connective. The right side of our main connective says, if he is unshaven, then he must have BO. Obviously, it's an arrow, but because it's an arrow, we have to look out for order. This is if-then sentence. The order is left alone. It's fine. Left side, we've already translated if. He is unshaven, not S. Right side, he must have BO. Didn't use deodorant, not D. Phew, good work. Now look back at that SL sentence. Notice that in the past, we've been filling in our parentheses as we go. In this case, we've left it to the end. You'll notice it is much easier to fill in parentheses as you go. This is a lot harder. But let's see, because I had you make little marks as we were working. So what do we notice? Well, first, if we're going to work from our main connective, notice what we can do. We can clearly see that the and that is the main connective, needs to be isolated. So first, we can draw parentheses from around either side to isolate that main connective. Now, what else did you see? Remember, we labeled that or on the left as a major or very large connective. So what does that mean? We also need to group that smaller and, the and that includes not H and not S. So we need some interior parentheses there. So now, if we look at this and we ask, is the main connective clear? Yes, it is. So now we're set. Premise 3. Last little synonym. Sorry. Jeff's hair must look like a nest. That sounds terrible, so I'm going to underline it. That sounds negative. Comma underline. If underlined, he didn't, underline didn't, take the time to shave. Now, what is the main connective? Clearly the comma if signals that this is an arrow. What does the arrow represent? Then the if is signaling it. But it's an arrow, so we have to worry about order. What do we have? This one we have to rearrange. Look at it. If he didn't take the time to shave happens first, Jeff's hair must look like a nest is the result. It happens second. Left side. He didn't take the time to shave, didn't shave, not S. Flipping it around, the right side, Jeff's hair must look like a nest. Yep, you've got it. Didn't brush his hair, not H. We're on the last argument. Bottom argument on page 18. This is just incredible complexity. If you can do this one, you will have no problem on the big quiz at all. I might have one example that's fairly complicated, but nothing like this. So if you can follow what I'm doing here, even if you can't do it yourself, if you can follow all these parts really well, you will be fine on this big quiz. So we start with the conclusion. Jeff remembered to shave only if, I underline only if, he remembered to do the other three. I'm underlining that. There's a lot going on there. So let's go step by step. What is the main connective? Clearly it's the only if. So we underline that and label it. What is only if though? If you look back, I believe it's page 16, I give you tricky idioms. Only if is a strange expression and all it means is then. That's how we best capture what it does. So what does it do? It's simply an arrow and you leave it right where it is. I know that if could be off-putting, it makes it sound like it should be rearranged, but that's actually how we use that expression only if. Again, English is very uncareful. It has some strange connectives. Only if, translate, arrow, and we are already told the order is fine for only if, pretend it says then. Left side, Jeff remembered to shave, simply S. Right side, he remembered to do the other three. Now, obviously, what's being implied here by the context of this argument, he did all the other things. How do we say he did all the other things? And. So there is no implied order, so I'm just going to put them in a random order. I'm going to say D and T and H. He did the other three things. We already have shaved. Now he did the other three. He used deodorant and brushed his teeth and brushed his hair. Notice, look at your sentence. The main connective is really unclear. What do we need? Parentheses around that string of ands, separating it from the only if, the main connective arrow. Good. Go to premise 1. If, underline if, Jeff didn't, underline didn't, leave his hair unbrushed. Notice that expression, negative. Comma, underline, then underline, if underlined, he used deodorant or underline shaved, comma, don't forget to underline comma, he would have remembered to brush his teeth. That last part sounds positive. We read again looking for the main connective. If Jeff didn't leave his hair unbrushed, then if he used deodorant or shaved, he would have remembered to brush his teeth. This is a little tricky, but the then signifies that main connective. So that first comma is the major break in the sentence. So mark that out. How do we translate then? Arrow. Don't worry about the complexity. Go step by step. Let's work on the left side of the arrow first. An arrow can affect order, but that if at the beginning of the sentence gives it away. The left side is already on the left. Jeff didn't leave his hair unbrushed. Uh-oh. Do you see it? Brushed his hair is H, but this says unbrushed, so we need not H, but it says I didn't do that, so not H. I didn't leave my hair unbrushed. Good. Then arrow. Right side. Let's just pretend we're doing this sentence by itself. If he used deodorant or shaved, he would have remembered to brush his teeth. What is the largest connective there? Not the main connective, but pay attention. That if then, where is the then? At the comma. So that needs another arrow where the comma would go. In English, I would draw a little arrow there so I can pay attention to where I am. An arrow can affect order, but this one is fine. If he used deodorant or shaved, then, comma, he would have remembered to brush his teeth. The order is okay. Left side of this arrow says, let's translate the or first. There it is, easy. Used deodorant or shaved. He used deodorant, D, shaved, S, clear. Right side of our arrow, he would have remembered to brush his teeth, simply T. Now, we've got to do some work with parentheses. Notice we've got all of these two-place connectives and they're not connected together. We need parentheses to make sense. The or between deodorant or shaved, that claim is clearly sandwiched together, so let's put a parentheses around our or sentence. Then we have our main connective. We need to isolate that from the whole right side, so we need additional parentheses to separate the rest of the right side. Now, main connective is clear. And we reached the beast example. This will be tough to do out loud. I can't write on the board while I'm doing this, so please, right? See if you can follow me on paper. We read the premise number 2, underlining all possible connectives. Jeff must have brushed his teeth, comma, underline, comma, used deodorant, comma, underline, comma, and shaved, comma, but, underline, comma, but. Jeff, as usual, forgot, underline, forgot, that's negative, to brush his hair, comma, but, underline, comma, but, if, underline, if, he forgot, underline, forgot, to brush his hair, comma, then, underline, comma, then, he likely also forgot, underline, forgot, to use deodorant, or, underline, or, forgot, underline, forgot, shave, to shave. Whew. To review, what should you have underlined? Look, right? Comma before used, and, but, forgot, but, if, forgot, then, forgot, or forgot. Damn. Luckily, Jeff has our nice little step-by-step technique, so we can go one piece at a time. This helps a lot. Now we look for the main connective. Let's read. Jeff must have brushed his teeth, used deodorant, and shaved, but Jeff, as usual, forgot to brush his hair. But if he forgot to brush his hair, then he likely also forgot to use deodorant or forgot to shave. Main connective. The issue is it the first or the second but if you look at it in context, it's the second one, right? So between hair and if, that's our main connective. Label it in English so you don't forget where it is. Luckily, and cannot affect order, so we'll go to the left side of our main connective and work there by itself first. Jeff must have brushed his teeth, used deodorant, and shaved, but Jeff, as usual, forgot to brush his hair. That other but is the next largest connective on the left side, so let's write that in and remember that that's a large connective. Left side of the new but translated and. Jeff must have brushed his teeth, used deodorant, and shaved. Now notice, that and is different than our connective but. Keep clear. What do we have? How do we translate that first comma? Jeff must have brushed his teeth, comma, used deodorant, and shaved. Again, English is stupid. English tells us you can't say and, but in SL we have no weird rule like that. So what is that first comma? An and. So we have a string of ands. What do we have? 2 ands. On the left side, Jeff must have brushed his teeth, T. Between that and the next one, used deodorant, D, and finally, shaved. Is it obvious that we need to isolate that list? Yes. So let's do parentheses right there. Now we have, but Jeff, as usual, forgot to brush his hair. What does that say? On the right side of that large and is forgot to brush his hair, not H. Take a breather. Now we can move to the other side of the main connective. That's the great break in doing the main connective first. Right side. If. So we need to look for where the then is. The if is included in the then, and there we see it. If he forgot to brush his hair, so there's our large connective. So fill in the arrow then. Is this in fine left to right order? It is. If he forgot happens first, then happens second. Left side of our arrow. He forgot to brush his hair. Not H. Right side of the arrow. He likely also forgot to use deodorant or forgot to shave. Notice the translation there. Notice how the idiom implies he forgot one or the other. Notice how it radically changes the negation scheme. He likely also forgot to use deodorant or forgot to shave. Let's fill in the or and translate around it. He forgot to use deodorant, not D. He forgot to shave, not S. Clear. Now, we need to first clearly isolate the whole right side, separate it from the main connective, that and that represents our main connective but. Then how are they grouped? That comma is the major grouping in the English sentence, so we need to separate and group together the not D or not S. Now let's look at it. Clear. Main connective is the and in the middle of the sentence. Everything is grouped around it. We did it.